Hi everyone, my name is Santiago, this is Victor and this is Grace, and we're going to make a presentation about the case of the SS Lotus. That was a case that settled a very important principle of international law. My partners are going to make a brief about the facts of the case, and then we're going to talk about the different points of view of the two parties in conflict. We're gonna tell you about the decision of the court, and then we're going to make some personal conclusions about the case.
Okay, so I'm going to start. So in 1927, a collision occurred between a French vessel, which was known as the Lotus, and the Turkish vessel, which was the Bozkır. After the collision happened, the Turkish vessel sank, which then killed 8 Turkish nationals, and after that, the 10 survivors of the Turkish vessel were then taken onto the French Lotus, and from there they proceeded to go to Turkey, where the trial began. And Victor is going to tell you about the trial.
Okay, after the break ship, the Lotus continued his trip, and when at the next day it arrived to Istanbul. When they arrived to Istanbul, the government of Turkey arrested Demont, the captain of the French vessel, and Hassan Bey, the captain of the Turkish vessel. They arrest both of them, and the government starts a criminal process against them. Demont, the French captain, opposed an exception of incompetence because he said that his ship was from France, so France have the competition from the case. But obviously, the court of Turkey didn't accept that exception and continued with the process. When the process ended, both of them, Demon and Hassan Bey, was declared guilty. They have to comply 80 days, in prison. When France was notified about that, they said to the Turkish government that they don't have competence there, so they have to extradite Demon to France, and France will try them. Obviously, Turkey didn't accept that, and both parts said France said that they have the competence. Turkey said that he have the competence, so both of them decide to take the case to the permanent court of justice, and the court will decide who have the competence.
Well, regarding the law issue, we can first of all we need to make some previous considerations. In the first place, we have to consider that the collision took place in the high seas, so the jurisdictions in conflict are no other than French jurisdiction or Turkish jurisdiction. In second place, there is the matter of that this question is just a question regarding jurisdiction, and France is not questioning the legitimacy of the legal system of Turkey. They are just saying that Turkey lacks of jurisdiction in order to prosecute the Lieutenant Demont. And in the third place, we need to consider the question of connexity. This means that as the collision it's a complex of facts, all the issue needs to be resolved by the same court, a unique court, either the French one or the Turkish one, but it needs to be resolved by the same court. Now we are going to move forward to the main arguments presented by the two parties in conflict, starting with the Turkish argument.
Okay, so now we're going to refer to Article 6, which states the Turkish argument. So Article 6 of the Turkish Penal Code states that any foreigner who, apart from the cases contemplated in Article 4, commits an offence abroad, the prejudice of Turkey or of a Turkish subject for which offence Turkish law prescribes a penalty involving loss of freedom for a minimum period not less than 1 year, shall be punished in accordance with the Turkish Penal Code, provided that he is arrested in Turkey. The penalty shall, however, be reduced by 1/3, and instead of the death penalty, 20 years of penal servitude shall be awarded. Nevertheless, in such cases, the prosecution will only be instituted at the request of the Ministry of Justice or on the complaint of the injured party. So if the offence committed injured another foreigner, the guilty person shall be punished at the request of the Minister of Justice in accordance with the provisions set out in the first paragraph of this article, provided that, however, the article in question is one for which Turkish law prescribes a penalty involving loss of freedom for a minimum of 3 years. Also, that there's not an extradition treaty, or that the extradition has not been accepted, either by the government of the locality where the guilty person has committed the offence, or by the government of his own country. Now I'll hand it over to Santiago, and he's going to tell you the French argument.
Well, the French argument is backed up in it is the Article 15 of the Convention of Lausanne, in which took part France and Turkey. And well, Article 15 states that all the questions related to jurisdiction between Turkey and the other contracting powers shall be resolved in accordance to the principles of international law. This leads us to the question of what means to be in accordance with the principles of international law. There are two possible interpretations. Does that mean that you need to have an explicit principle that allows you to do whatever that you want to, or it's enough that what you do doesn't contravene any of the currently existing principles?
Okay, as we can see, the two arguments between the two states are very different, are opposite, like the two sides of a coin. For one way, we have the argument of France. France said that Turkey doesn't have a competition because doesn't exist an international norm that give that competition. So the argument of France is very restrictive, prohibitive, because they are saying you only can do all things that the law allows you, nothing else, nothing more. So Turkey have to prove that the existence of an international law who give to them the competence. On the other hand, the argument of Turkey said that they have the competence because doesn't exist an international norm who prohibit that. So the arguments from Turkey are more permissive because they are saying we can do everything that is not prohibited by the international law. So the court, to resolve that problem, have to see what or decide what is the best interpretation.
Well, at this point, we're going to analyze the arguments provided by the court in order to reach to the final decision. Here, the court is faced with a new question that goes further than the original question asked by the French government. This new question has to do with the aims and the purpose of international law. I mean, what is the utility of the international law? International law governs relationships between independent states, and when it comes to restrictions to the independence of the states provided by international law, the conclusion is that they cannot be presumed. So now we are going to provide the general considerations Grace is about to.
Okay, well, firstly, the jurisdiction is essentially territorial. So this states that this means that states can't exercise their jurisdictions like outside of their territories. However, this doesn't mean that international law doesn't allow states to exercise their jurisdictions when it comes to two cases which took place abroad, even though there's not like like an international rule which explicitly permits them to do that. So like all that can be required from the states is that it doesn't contravene the limits imposed by international law. So therefore the court has to decide if any international rule exists that limits the freedom of states to extend their court's jurisdiction further on. So
Okay, in order to do this, the court have to examine 3 points presented by France. The first point is that international law doesn't allow to a state to start a criminal process only by the reason of the nationality of the victim. The second point presented by France is that the international law recognizes the exclusive jurisdiction of the state whose flag is flown to regard everything that occurs in the ship. And the third point presented by France is that principle is especially applicable to the case.
Well, regarding the first point presented by France, the court says that once that it is admitted that the effects of the offense were produced in the Turkish vessel, then it becomes impossible to take that there is a rule of international law that prohibits Turkey from prosecuting the lieutenant demons. This is because they make a different interpretation of the territorial principle, in which they take that territorial principle involves also the place where the effects of the offense are produced. So they justify the prosecution within this territorial principle. Regarding the second argument, it is true that the vessels in the high seas are subjected to no authority except that one of the states whose flag they fly. But this second point is related to the first one. Turkey can justify the prosecution by saying that using the territorial principle, by saying that the effects were produced in the Turkish territory, and France in this case will have to prove the existence of a rule that gives France the exclusive jurisdiction in order to prosecute the delinquent. They weren't able to do this. The third one, regarding that the principle stated in the point 2 is applicable to a collision case. Regarding this, France wanted to provide some cases in order to prove the existence of a rule that gives them the exclusive jurisdiction in cases of collision. And after analyzing these cases, the court got to the conclusion that what was submitted by France wasn't warranted. Well, now we've reached to the final decision of the court, and Victor is going to tell you about that.
Okay, if we remember the second part of the video, the main problem of the case is there exists any contradiction between an international principle of law and the Article 6 of the Penal Code from Turkey. The court didn't find any contradiction between didn't find any principle and any contradiction between the Article 6 and the international law. So the conclusion of the court was that Turkey have right to try Commandant Demon and condemn him. So now we arrive to the end of the video. So we have to think why this video is important for international law. So now Santiago and Grace are going to explain some conclusion that we arrived.
Okay, first of all, the first importance of the case is that it highlights that there's a new interpretation of the principle of territoriality, and this principle allows a state to treat an offence which was committed like abroad as if it was as if it took place in its own territory. And Santiago is going to tell you the second importance of this case.
Well, the other reason why we think that this case was important is because it settles an important general principle of international law. That, as stated before, we said that international law is to govern relations between independent states, and that the restrictions upon independence of the states cannot be presumed. So we reached to the conclusion, and as it is settled in this principle regarding international law, everything that is not prohibited for the states, it is permitted.